My wife was cheating on me with a coworker. I tracked her every move and now she's begging to fix our marriage, but it all started innocently enough, or at least I thought it did. My name's John, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, for nearly 12 years. We've had a good life together, at least on the surface. We're both in our late 30s. We have 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, and we used to have what I thought was a solid, unshakable marriage. I guess you could say I was living in a comfortable illusion. But lately, things had begun to feel off. Emily seemed distant. We used to stay up late watching movies together, but she'd started going to bed early, claiming exhaustion from work. She's a marketing manager, so I didn't think much of it at first. Who wouldn't be tired after dealing with clients all day? But it wasn't just that. Her phone, which had always been left around carelessly, was now constantly glued to her hand or pocket. Even when she'd head to the bathroom, she'd take it with her. That was new, and it made me uneasy. It's funny how you can sense when something's wrong, even if there's no clear proof. I wasn't sure yet, but my gut told me to start paying attention. And that's when everything started to unravel. One Friday night, Emily mentioned she had a work dinner with a new client. She seemed nervous, which wasn't like her. Normally, she's confident, always in control, but that night, she spent way too much time picking out an outfit. She finally settled on this tight, red dress I'd never seen before. It looked great on her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't dressing up for some client. I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband jumping to conclusions. But something felt wrong. She left, and I did what I usually do on Friday nights. Put the kids to bed and tried to relax. But I couldn't. Instead, I found myself staring at her closet, her makeup stand, her neatly arranged perfume bottles. That's when I noticed it. The smell. Her favorite perfume, the one she always wore on special occasions, had been sprayed heavily around the room. Not her usual routine for a work dinner. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was overthinking things. But doubt was like a slow burn, and soon it would explode into something I never expected. Emily didn't come home until late. Really late. I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep when she finally walked in. She tried to tiptoe around, but I could hear the click of her heels on the hardwood. She went straight to the bathroom, where I heard the water running. She was taking a shower. That's when my suspicion turned into something darker. Why would she need to shower after a work dinner? The next morning, I casually asked her how the dinner went. She gave me this weirdly vague response, something like, "Oh, it was fine. Just boring client stuff." She didn't meet my eyes, though. Emily always looks me in the eye, especially when she's lying. I'd seen that same look when she fibbed about overspending on a shopping trip or ate the last slice of cake in the fridge. This was different, though. This wasn't about cake. This was about something much bigger. Still, I didn't push it. I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. But later that day, I got my first real clue. Emily had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was upstairs getting ready for yoga. It buzzed, and without thinking, I glanced at the screen. The name that flashed up was Jake. Jake wasn't someone I knew from her work. I didn't recognize the name at all. The message? Just 3 words. "Last night was amazing." My heart stopped. Seeing those words on her phone felt like a punch to the gut. My hands started shaking, and my mind raced. Who the hell is Jake? I stared at the phone for a moment, debating if I should open the message, but before I could do anything, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. I panicked and put the phone down exactly where it had been. I didn't have time to think. My mind was scrambling to act normal. "Heading out to yoga," she said casually, grabbing her phone from the counter without a second glance. "I'll be back in a couple of hours." I nodded, trying to hide the turmoil brewing inside me. "All right, have fun." As soon as she left, I collapsed into a chair, my heart pounding. The worst part was I didn't even know how to feel. I wasn't angry, at least not yet. I was just confused. How had we gotten here? I replayed the last few months in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. After about 15 minutes of pacing, I grabbed my laptop and did something I never thought I'd do. I logged into her email. We'd shared passwords for years, a habit left over from when we first got married. Neither of us had ever bothered to change them, and I never had a reason to snoop until now. My hands trembled as I typed in her password, and sure enough, it worked. I went straight to her sent messages, hoping to find nothing, hoping I was just being paranoid. But there it was, a whole string of emails between her and Jake. Messages that made me sick to my stomach. They weren't just flirting. They were planning trips. They had a whole relationship going on behind my back. And worse, the last email had been sent 2 days ago. I can't wait to be with you again. Monday night at the hotel. I sat back in the chair, numb. It was real. She was cheating on me. My hands hovered over the keyboard, my stomach in knots. Part of me wanted to rage. I could have called her right then and there, screamed at her over the phone, demanded an explanation, but something held me back. Maybe it was shock, maybe disbelief, or maybe I just didn't want to face the truth yet. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen, reading the emails over and over again like some kind of masochist. Each line felt like a dagger. She wasn't just sleeping with Jake. She was emotionally involved. They talked about everything, work, their frustrations, even their dreams for the future. What hit me hardest was how familiar her tone was with him. It was the way she used to talk to me, back when we were still madly in love, before everything turned cold. That night, when she came home from yoga, I couldn't even look at her. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I needed more time to figure out what to do. She acted normal, or at least, she thought she was acting normal. I could tell she knew something was off with me, though. She kept glancing at me while we sat in silence, watching TV. I didn't say a word. How could I? Inside, I was screaming, but I was stuck, paralyzed by the weight of what I'd discovered. There was no going back now. I had to confront her eventually, but I wasn't ready, not yet. Not without a plan. I needed to be smart about this. The last thing I wanted was for her to flip it around, make me seem like the bad guy, or worse, lie her way out of it. I had to be sure. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and every time I looked at Emily, my mind replayed those emails. She was going about her life like nothing had changed, but for me, everything had. I needed proof, something undeniable that she couldn't talk her way out of. The emails were bad enough, but I wanted more, something solid. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I started spying on my own wife. It was a Monday morning when I made the decision. Emily was in the shower, and her phone was charging on the nightstand. I took my chance. My hands shook as I downloaded a GPS tracking app and installed it on her phone. I knew her schedule well enough. She had her work dinner planned with Jake that night. I'd already read the email. They were meeting at a hotel on the other side of town, one I hadn't even known existed. The app would give me her exact location in real time. If she wasn't where she said she'd be, I'd know. I felt sick to my stomach as I did it, like I was sinking to her level. But I had no choice. If I was going to confront her, I needed more than just a vague suspicion and a few emails. That evening, as she got ready to leave for her work dinner, I played it cool. I kissed her goodbye like I always did, even though every fiber of my being wanted to scream. My heart pounded as I watched her walk out the door, knowing full well she wasn't heading to any client meeting. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my phone, opened the app, and watched her little blue move across the city. I knew exactly where she was headed, and I knew what was waiting for me when I got there. As the little blue on my phone moved steadily across the city, I sat in the dark, the silence in our house unbearable. The kids were at my parents' for the night, thankfully, but I couldn't shake the nausea building in my gut. My heart raced as Emily's location updated. She was heading exactly where I feared, a hotel on the outskirts of town. I didn't want to believe it, even as the evidence stared me in the face. Maybe this was all just a huge misunderstanding. Maybe it was an innocent work thing, and my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. People don't go to hotels for work dinners. I made a decision right then. I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my car keys, drove to the hotel, and parked a few blocks away. I didn't want to get too close in case I spooked her. From there, I sat in my car, staring at the front entrance of the hotel, debating if I should go inside. A part of me wanted to rush in, find her, and demand an explanation. But another part of me, the smarter part, told me to wait, to watch. I couldn't afford to confront her without solid proof, something she couldn't wiggle out of with more lies. About 20 minutes later, I saw her. Emily walked out of the hotel lobby, laughing, arm in arm with a man who could only be Jake. He was tall, muscular, and everything I wasn't. They looked so comfortable together, like they'd done this 100 times before. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. It was all the proof I needed, but instead of feeling relief, I felt hollow. Watching them together, it became painfully clear this wasn't some one-night fling. They had a relationship, one that had been going on for who knows how long. I sat there for a few minutes, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to figure out what to do next. Do I storm over and confront them now? Do I follow them and see where they go? Before I could decide, they both climbed into Jake's car and drove off. And just like that, I was left alone with nothing but the cold, hard truth. I sat in my car long after they'd driven off, staring at the now empty hotel entrance. The pictures on my phone were enough to destroy any remaining doubt, but instead of the anger I'd expected to feel, I was numb. I wanted to scream, cry, break something. Anything to release the tidal wave of emotions building inside me, but all I felt was a hollow emptiness. The rest of the drive home was a blur. I couldn't even remember getting out of the car, but suddenly, I was standing in our living room, looking around at the home we'd built together. Every picture, every piece of furniture, everything in that house had a memory attached to it. Now it all felt like a lie. I had a few hours before Emily would come home from her dinner. Part of me wanted to confront her the moment she walked through the door, to throw the photos in her face and demand an explanation. But I knew she'd try to lie her way out of it. She'd always been good at that. No, I needed to play it smart. I needed more than just photos. I needed her to confess. So I waited. When Emily finally came home, she acted like nothing was wrong. She breezed through the door with a smile on her face, kissed me on the cheek, and asked how my night had been. It took everything in me to act normal, to not let on that I knew everything. I smiled, told her the kids were fine, and made some small talk about work. I watched her closely, looking for any sign of guilt or hesitation. But she played her part perfectly. As we sat on the couch, I asked her casually, "So, how was your dinner with the client?" She glanced at me, her face completely unreadable. "Oh, it was fine. Just boring work stuff." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah? Where'd you end up going?" She didn't even hesitate. "Someplace downtown. The usual spot." I stared at her, my heart racing. She was lying so effortlessly. How many times had she done this? How many nights had she come home and looked me in the eye while carrying on with another man? But I wasn't ready to show my cards. Not yet. I had to wait just a little longer. As Emily continued her story about her work dinner, my mind was racing. How could she sit there, lying so easily, like everything was normal? Every word she spoke felt like another betrayal, but I kept my cool. I had to. I needed her to slip up. "I'm glad you had a good time," I said, forcing a smile. "You deserve it with all the hard work you've been putting in." She smiled back at me, clearly pleased with herself. "Thanks, babe. I'm just glad it's over." That's when I decided to push a little. You know, I was thinking maybe we could grab dinner at that same place this weekend. I've been wanting to check it out. For a split second, I saw it. Her eyes widened just slightly, her smile faltered. But it was quick, and she recovered almost immediately. Oh, I'm not sure if they're open on weekends. I think it's more of a weekday spot for business dinners. She shrugged, trying to act casual. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it. Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe we can try it some other time. The conversation moved on, but I could tell she was a little uneasy now. I had planted the seed of doubt in her mind. She knew I was paying attention. Now I just needed to set the final trap. The next day, while she was at work, I made my move. I called the hotel where she and Jake had met. I kept my story vague, said I'd lost something during my last visit, and wanted to confirm a reservation under Emily's name. The receptionist didn't hesitate. She confirmed the booking under my wife's name, along with Jake's. That was it. Proof beyond any doubt. They had booked the hotel room together. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I decided to spring the trap. So, how's work looking next week? Any more dinners planned? I asked, keeping my tone light, but watching her closely. Emily paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. No, nothing like that. Just the usual meetings, she said, smiling weakly. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Funny, I called the hotel today. You know, the one you were at with Jake. Her face went pale. For the first time, she didn't have a quick comeback. She just sat there, frozen, staring at me. It was finally out in the open. There was no way she could deny it now. The silence between us felt like it lasted forever. Emily's face had gone completely white, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. It was like I had ripped the mask right off her face, exposing the truth underneath. I leaned back, trying to keep my voice steady, though inside, I felt like I was breaking apart. You're not going to deny it, are you? She blinked, and for a second, I saw the gears turning in her head. She was trying to figure out what to say, how to twist this, but she knew she was cornered. Finally, she exhaled and put her fork down. I don't know what you want me to say, John, she stammered. It's not what you think. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Not what I think. I called the hotel. Emily, I know you were there with Jake. I saw the emails. I've seen everything. My voice cracked slightly as I said it, the weight of those words hanging in the air. Her eyes filled with panic. Okay, yes. I was with him, but she paused, grasping for some way to soften the blow. But it's not serious. It's just a distraction, something that happened because things haven't been right between us. I stared at her in disbelief. A distraction? You've been lying to my face, sneaking around for God knows how long, and you call it a distraction. Her lip quivered, and she finally broke down. I didn't mean for it to happen, John. You've been so distant lately, always busy with work or the kids, and I needed something else. I needed to feel wanted again. Hearing those words sent a wave of anger through me, but underneath it, a deep sadness. I've been here, Emily. I've been right here, doing everything I can for this family. And you. I had to pause, swallowing hard as the reality of her betrayal sank in. You went and found someone else, behind my back. She started to cry, but it didn't move me. I wasn't ready to feel sympathy for her, not after everything. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted to hurt you. I stood up from the table, feeling the distance between us grow wider by the second. You already did. I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing at the table. I spent that night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Emily's sobs had echoed in my head long after I left the room, but they didn't touch me. I felt numb. There was no relief, no closure, just an empty silence. She had admitted it, and now the truth was out, but it hadn't made anything better. If anything, it only confirmed how broken things were. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of her moving around quietly in the kitchen. She didn't say a word as I walked past her to get coffee. The tension between us was unbearable, but I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I took the day off work, needing time to think. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind replaying the confrontation over and over. What was I supposed to do now? We had built an entire life together, a house, 2 kids, years of memories. And yet, I couldn't see a way forward. How do you come back from this kind of betrayal? Could I even forgive her? By the time I returned home, it was late afternoon. The house was quiet, the kids still at my parents', and Emily was sitting at the dining room table, staring blankly at her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red from crying. "We need to talk," she said softly. I didn't respond right away, just nodded and sat down across from her. She looked like she'd aged overnight, the guilt and shame written all over her face. But it didn't change what she'd done. "I know I've hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just need you to understand. I never stopped loving you, John. This thing with Jake, it was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. I let things get out of control." I stared at her, feeling the weight of her words, but not sure if I believed them. "A mistake?" I said bitterly. "This wasn't a one-time thing, Emily. You've been lying to me for months. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." She flinched at my words, but I wasn't going to soften them. She needed to face what she'd done. "I don't know what else to say," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've ruined everything. I've destroyed us." I didn't respond right away, letting the silence stretch between us. Maybe she was right. Maybe she had destroyed us. But I wasn't ready to make that decision yet. "I don't know what happens next," I finally said, my voice low. "But right now, I need space. I need time to figure this out." She nodded, tears welling up again. "I understand." Without another word, I stood up and walked out of the room, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like a heavy fog. The days that followed felt like a blur. Emily and I barely spoke, existing in the same house but worlds apart. The kids were back, which made it easier to avoid any heavy conversations. We pretended like things were normal for their sake, but underneath, everything was fractured. I found myself spending more time outside, sitting in the backyard long after the sun went down, staring up at the sky, trying to make sense of my feelings. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was confused, heartbroken, and unsure of what to do next. Should I leave? Could I forgive her? Every option felt impossible. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Emily came out to the porch where I was sitting. She sat next to me, not saying a word at first, just staring out at the darkness. The silence between us felt heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was just there. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, breaking the silence, "about what you said, that you need space." I didn't respond, but I listened. "I think you're right. We can't keep pretending everything is okay for the kids. And I can't keep asking you to forgive me when I know how much I've hurt you." She took a deep breath, as if trying to steady herself before continuing. "I'll stay at my sister's for a while, give you the space you need." It surprised me. I had expected her to cling to the idea of staying and fixing things, but this felt like she understood the depth of what had happened. She wasn't running from it anymore. "Maybe that's for the best," I said after a long pause. I don't know how to move forward with this right now." She nodded, her eyes glistening in the faint porch light. "I don't know either, John, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes if there's even the slightest chance we can fix this." I didn't have an answer for her. Maybe there was a chance, or maybe this was the beginning of the end, but I knew that I needed time to figure that out for myself. "I'll go in the morning," she said softly, standing up and giving me one last look before heading back inside. As I sat there alone on the porch, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that I'd finally have the space I needed to think clearly. sadness that the woman I had built my life with was now a stranger, someone I wasn't sure I could trust again. The morning after Emily left, the house felt eerily quiet. It was like the air itself was heavier, the silence pressing down on me. She had taken a few bags and headed to her sister's, leaving me and the kids behind. I hadn't explained much to them, just said that their mom was staying with Aunt Lisa for a bit to help her out. They didn't ask too many questions, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. Without Emily around, everything felt surreal. I didn't miss the lies or the tension, but I couldn't shake the sense of loss. The daily rhythm of our life together was gone. The kitchen table, once a place of family meals, now felt like a battleground of unspoken words and broken promises. I had space now, just like I had asked for, but it didn't bring the clarity I thought it would. Days passed, and I found myself trapped in my own head. Every memory of our life together was now tainted. Even the good times felt like they had cracks in them, like I had been blind to what was really going on beneath the surface. I kept replaying the confrontation, wondering if I had missed something, some sign that things could have been different if I had just seen it earlier. Friends and family started reaching out, noticing Emily's absence. They asked if everything was okay, and I gave vague answers, not ready to explain what had really happened. I didn't want to be the guy with the cheating wife, the one everyone felt sorry for. But deep down, I was starting to realize something. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want revenge. I just wanted the truth. I wanted to understand how we had gotten here, and whether there was any way back. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat down with a notebook and started writing out everything I felt. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but it felt like the only way to process the mess inside my head. I wrote about the early years of our marriage, how things had been so easy back then. I wrote about the changes, the growing distance, the lies, and the betrayal. But most of all, I wrote about how lost I felt now, lost in the silence of a life I didn't recognize anymore. By the time I put the pen down, I realized that the answer wasn't going to come quickly or easily. Maybe it wouldn't come at all, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in the dark. I had to decide if I was going to fight for this marriage or let it go. But the hardest part, I wasn't sure which option scared me more. A week passed with Emily staying at her sister's, and in that time, I thought the space would bring some clarity. Instead, it just deepened my confusion. I missed her, but I didn't trust her. I thought about the life we had built, the kids, the memories, but then I'd remember the betrayal, the lies, and it would send me spiraling again. I didn't know what to feel anymore: anger, sadness, maybe even guilt. Was I partly to blame for what happened? Had I been too focused on work, too distant? But every time I started to think that way, I reminded myself, Emily made a choice to cheat. I hadn't pushed her into Jake's arms. She had gone there willingly. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "Can we talk? I feel like we need to figure out what happens next." I stared at the message for a while, unsure of how to respond. I knew we had to talk eventually. The silence wasn't sustainable, but I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever came next. Still, I texted her back. "Yeah, let's talk tomorrow. You can come by after work." The next day, Emily showed up just after the kids had gone to my parents' for the weekend. When I opened the door, she looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if I'd yell, cry, or slam the door in her face. Instead, I just motioned for her to come in. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same place where we'd shared a million meals, laughs, and conversations. But today, it felt like enemy territory. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her wedding ring, an almost ironic gesture given the circumstances. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I hurt you, John. I know I ruined everything, and I don't know if we can ever fix this. But I need you to know, I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose us." I didn't say anything right away. Her words hung in the air, full of regret, but I wasn't sure if they were enough. After all, this wasn't just some fight. We could patch up. This was months of deception, months of her choosing someone else. Finally, I spoke. Why did you do it, Emily? Was it about me? About us? Or was it about him? She sighed, looking down at the table. It wasn't about him, John. I don't know how to explain it. I felt lost. We weren't connecting anymore, and I felt like I was invisible. Jake, he made me feel seen, but it wasn't real. I know that now. He wasn't what I wanted. Then why didn't you come to me? I asked, my voice breaking a little. Why didn't you tell me how you felt? Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know. I didn't think you'd understand. I didn't think it would matter. Those words stung more than anything. I didn't think it would matter. The room went silent again, both of us sitting there, each drowning in our own thoughts. I realized in that moment that Emily wasn't just apologizing, she was begging for me to believe that there was still something left worth saving. But I wasn't sure if I could. As Emily sat across from me, tears in her eyes, I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Could we really come back from this? Could I ever trust her again? I wasn't sure if I had it in me to forgive her, or if I even wanted to try. But one thing was clear. This conversation was going to define the rest of our lives. I don't know if I can do this, I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. You shattered everything we built, Emily. I keep thinking about all the lies, the sneaking around. Every time I look at you, I see him. Her tears fell faster, but she didn't try to defend herself. She just nodded, like she knew there was nothing she could say to make it better. I know, she whispered. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. All I can do is be honest with you now. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust again, John, but I need to know if you're even willing to try. I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, that wanted to fix this for the sake of our family. But the hurt was so deep, and the trust we once had felt completely broken. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again, I said quietly, but I owe it to our kids to try. I don't want them to grow up in a broken home, if there's even a small chance we can fix this. Emily nodded, wiping her tears. We'll take it one day at a time. I won't pressure you. I just want the chance to make things right. We sat in silence for a few more moments, the weight of everything hanging between us. It wasn't a resolution, not really. It was more like the first step in a long, uncertain road. I didn't know if we'd make it, or if this was just prolonging the inevitable. But for now, it was the best I could offer. Okay, I finally said, we'll try. As soon as the words left my mouth, I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I had no idea what the future held. But at least I wasn't standing still anymore. We were moving, even if the path ahead was murky and full of uncertainty. Emily reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you, John. I won't let you down again. I didn't say anything in response. Part of me wanted to believe her, but I knew this wasn't about words anymore. It was about actions, about rebuilding something that had been torn apart. Only time would tell if it was possible. But for now, we had made the decision to try, and that was enough for today.